Hello, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be reading and ranking the Goodreads Choice Award nominees in the category of romance. This is my 4th year doing this kind of video, and I am equally as excited to be doing it this year as I was the first year that I decided to do these. Typing up the notes for this video and doing a little bit of reflection, I realized that this is absolutely my favorite video that I make all year, so I'm hoping that that comes across in my excitement as I talk about these books and in the quality of this video. I'm doing it the same way this year as I did last year, in that I'm going to be reading all 20 nominees and trying to predict the 10 finalists and the winner of the Goodreads Choice Awards. But I also took it a step further this year, and I also decided that I was going to attempt to predict the 20 nominees before they came out. So this video is going to be part vlog, part sit down video, as I walk you through the 20 nominees this year. But before that happens, I'm going to take you back to November so you can see how my predictions panned out, if I was good or bad at predicting what would actually show up on the Goodreads Choice Awards. I am going to try to predict the Goodreads Choice Award nominees in the category of romance. Came up with a list. Hayden is going to tell me whether or not I got my predictions right. I'm gonna check them off as I go. My guess is that I get at least half of them right. I feel like that's fucking bold, but I know romance, I feel like. No, hopefully actually there are some things on here that I haven't read so that I can vlog them. First up I have Love on the Brain by Allie Hazelwood. It's a pink book, if that helps.
Yes, that is on there.
Hell yeah. Okay. A Lady for a Duke. I think that one was kind of like a unlikely candidate, but I put it on here anyway.
Doesn't look like it's there.
Part of Your World. It's blue and it has 2 people on the cover. Abby Jimenez.
Yes.
Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. It's a blue book
That
with
is
daisies
on
on
there.
it. Okay, sweet. Book Lovers by Emily Henry.
That is on there.
Okay. Electric Idol by Katie Robert.
That is on there.
Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover.
Yes, that is on there.
Okay. Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey.
That is on there.
Oh my god, I'm on a roll today. I swear I did not plan this. I tried to pick stuff that I knew was really popular, even if I hated it, because there's stuff on here that I totally hate. The Roughest Draft.
Not on there.
Damn. Falls Boys by Penelope Douglas.
That is not on there.
It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover.
That is on there.
Okay, yeah, figured. Delilah Green Doesn't Care. Purple book.
It is on there.
Oh, Good Girl Complex.
Not there.
Okay. The No Show. I put that one on there because I just can't fucking stand Beth O'Leary, and I just figured that one of her books would be on here.
No.
Oh, thank God.
Doesn't look like it.
Thank God. The American Roommate Experiment.
That is on there.
Either Twisted Hate or Twisted Lies by Anna Huang.
Twisted Hate.
I'm counting that one. Something Wilder by Christina Lauren. That one I don't actually think is going to be on there.
Not on there.
On the Island. Again, I with my luck, I just kind of thought it would be.
Not on there.
Oh, thank God. Every Summer After.
Yes.
Okay, and then Count Your Lucky Stars.
No, I don't see it.
I got 12 of the 20. I am impressed with myself. Let me look.
Do you want me to tell you the other ones
I want to look at it
that
myself.
you missed?
No, I want to look at it.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. The ones that I missed are The Kiss Curse by Erin Sterling. That one I almost put on my list because the X-Hex was on it last year, I think. But I just feel like I didn't hear much about this follow-up, so I didn't figure it would be on the list. Not too mad about it. I did read it. That's nice. Dating Dr. Dill. Also heard not great things about this book. I have heard a lot about it, so I guess I'm not shocked to see it on the list. The Bodyguard, I think, deserves a place on this list. I'm very happy to see it here. I wouldn't say it's like a total traditional romance. It's like a little bit more women's fiction, but not mad at that. You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty. I've been wanting to read that book, so I'm actually kind of excited to be reading that for this video. Wedding Crasher by Mia Sosa. Not shocked to see it. It was one that I was like on the fence about putting on my list, and I have read it as well. Thank You for Listening by Julia Whalen. I actually have that book, and I am excited to read it. Very, very surprised to see it on this list. I think it's honestly one of those that was really popular with publishers, but I've not really heard anyone talk about it. So I don't know, kind of surprised to see that one here, especially since like A Lady for a Duke, Something Wilder, like other ones didn't make it on the list. It kind of surprises me that this one did, but not shocked. Terms and Conditions. Did I put that one on here?
Nope.
Okay, I liked that book a lot, and that was one that I considered, but I was like on the fence about indies. I didn't think that very many indie romances would make it on the list, and now that I'm looking at it, if we don't count the Colleen Hoover books, we have Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score, Terms and Conditions, Twisted Hate, and that's pretty much it. I mean, I think it's more than last year, which I'm not mad at. And then Funny You Should Ask. I've heard a lot about that one, but it was not even on my radar compared to like some of the other popular romances. So overall, I just feel like this is kind of a weird assortment compared to last year. Like last year, there were definitely some that I thought didn't deserve to be on the list or like were weird choices. Like there were like 2 or 3 of them. This year I think there's definitely a lot that I'm just like, I thought there were books that were more popular, but I'm happy to see that there aren't any women's fiction books on the list. Ooh, not to throw shade, but like I'm happy about that. So anyway.
Okay, I'm about to say something and it might be a hot take.
Sure.
If you were to have shown me like 100 of these,
book covers?
just the covers.
Sure.
I feel like I could have guessed at least 10 of these on this list. I say that, but like it could be the case that you show me 100 books book covers, and like 80% of them
No, they
look
do.
like this.
They literally all do. They all
Okay.
look the same at this point. I mean, they're all like these
Mostly
kind of,
these, yeah.
I kind of want to count what books I haven't read, because I haven't really, I mean, I guess I just talked to you about them. So this has honestly been kind of shocking to me. 6 books out of this list I haven't read. Maybe I just don't know romance as well as I thought I did. Granted, I have been spending most of the year trying to get through my backlist and reading a lot of the books that I own. So I guess I shouldn't be that shocked, but I have my work cut out for me. I guess let's go ahead and get into the vlog portion of this video. Alright, let's talk. I am going to be splicing in the vlog portions of this video with the sit-down portions of this video to make it a little bit more interesting. I think that's maybe necessary because the book I'm going to talk about first is actually like quite uninteresting. For some reason I assumed the vlog portions of this video would be fucking thrilling, but of course we have to start with maybe the worst book that I'm going to have to read. Fingers crossed for the vlog portion of this video. Anyway, funny you should ask, where to begin? I am not a celebrity romance girl. I am not anti-celebrity romance. I have definitely read a couple in my day that I've enjoyed. I just think that the premise of a celebrity romance typically does not work because it's usually a really famous dude and a kind of pathetic woman. Is it bad to say that? I just think the heroine in this book's a little bit pathetic. I don't know. It just gives off pathetic girl energy when the heroine is like very, very into this guy and she's like getting a chance to be with a celebrity. I don't know. Maybe because I'm not a girl that was like really big into boy bands or like, I don't know, that sort of celebrity culture. It just comes off as a little bit corny to me and also pathetic. I mean, for lack of a better word, a little bit pathetic. Our main character, Hani, in this book is an aspiring writer, I guess. She writes for this, I think, online publication of some sort, maybe. It's not like a super big deal, but also she's just trying to like make it in the world. She gets the chance of a lifetime to interview this guy named Gabe. He is basically supposed to be a stand-in for Chris Evans. This whole book is supposed to be kind of like based off of some true events that happened. I don't care about that article. I'm not going to read that article. But Hani ends up interviewing Gabe. I guess over the next like 24 or 48 hours of them spending time together, she really like develops a crush on him and he kind of develops a crush on her. And we're supposed to believe that they have this like enduring romance that will take them across 10 years of separation and reunite them when they have a follow-up interview. No. I'm so unconvinced of the romance here. Like I said, I am someone who, generally speaking, enjoys a mutual pining situation or a situation where the guy falls first. I do not want to see a woman in a situation where she is like lusting after a guy who doesn't give a shit about her, okay? And I'm not saying that this guy doesn't. I mean, he obviously has an attraction to her from very early on. Just going into the book, you're just like, ooh, pathetic girl vibes. Additionally, I don't feel like the writing is doing enough to convince me that these two have any sort of chemistry or connection. I am definitely someone who doesn't actually mind long separations of time if once they get back together in the present there's some development, but I think my issue is that I just don't care about them. Like, I am listening to their past and their present. Right now we're mostly getting the sort of past scenes and getting to see this interview take place, and this is supposed to be what's carrying on the story. I'm not buying it. I'm sorry. I don't feel this incredible chemistry between the two of them. He might be like charming, but there's no like witty dialogue and moments where I'm like, wow, these two are just really well suited for each other. I'm just fucking bored, to be honest. I'm listening to this audio and it's perfectly palatable. I am able to tune in and out and like understand what's going on for sure, but I'm just not feeling invested in these characters and their romance. And it feels a little bit more literary too, I would say, and a little bit less emphasis on the interactions that make up a romance. And that's kind of a big failing, I would say, of this book. It kind of reminds me in some ways of Emily Henry's books that I do not connect with. I feel like I'm sort of like 50-50 on Emily Henry. Some books I like, some books I don't. The one book that I liked, People We Meet on Vacation, I felt like was definitely more of a romance, focused more on the emotional connection between two characters, and it felt very insulated in that it was just about two people. The other Emily Henry books are not, right? Like they have other side characters that kind of take away from the main romance, and I'm just kind of feeling that way here. We have a side character who is gay and is like kind of going through it a little bit, and it's not that I don't sympathize with his character, but I'm like, why are you relevant to the story in any way? I don't understand why we're getting this like whole drawn out side plot about you because I don't care about you. I'm supposed to be caring about the romance at the center, and yet I can't summon the feelings to give a shit. Does anyone else reply to audiobook narrators at the end of a book when they're like, we hope you enjoyed this unabridged version of? Because no, I did not enjoy Funny You Should Ask. The heroine continued to be pretty pathetic. I never really grew to like or care about her. I did, I guess, kind of feel bad for how pathetic she was for marrying this absolute douchebag, but beyond that, I just couldn't summon emotion and feeling for her. I wasn't really thinking about that in the last clip. Like, I wasn't really thinking about the fact that she ended up marrying a guy who belittled her even before they were married. For a book that was this literary, I was expecting a little bit more for some of the harder hitting things that happened, and I don't feel like that ever really came into fruition. Like, the hero of the story is a recovering alcoholic. That should have been an important part of the story, and yet it really wasn't. wasn't. The fact that our heroine was in an emotionally abusive relationship should have been focused on a little bit more. And maybe you could argue like, oh, it wasn't emotional abuse, he was just a dick. Either way, she should have been working to recover from that. And I think because of the way the story is written, you never really see that too much about the hero and heroine, and also not enough about the hero and heroine. It's like random periods in their lives when they knew each other. God forbid we see how she kind of grew from her divorce or how he recovered from his alcoholism. This was just not good. This was not a good book. I give it 2 stars. You know, I hate to start off on a bad note, but I feel like I start out on this note pretty much every time I do these videos. Could be wrong, but I know for certain in the last one I did of these, my first vlog clip, I was like, yeah, this book sucks. And you know what? It's a return to tradition. So this book is going to be in the number 1 spot. And I hesitate to even call it the number 1 spot. It's on the board, you know? And I can see this one floating at the bottom of the board once we continue to read, but that's where she's going to sit for a second. Let's move on because I don't want to think about this anymore. Sometimes romances with famous people at the helm don't totally suck. Just ask The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. This book is about Hannah, who is a bodyguard who is kind of going through some shit. Her mom just died, her boyfriend cheated on her, called her a bad kisser, and then dumped her. And because of all the turmoil going on in her life, her boss is denying her the opportunity to go on a really cool assignment overseas. Instead, she's given an easy job of protecting a hottie McHot A-list actor while he's in Houston to take care of his sick mom. And it was some of the most unrealistic, couldn't possibly happen, but also incredibly fun stuff I've read all year. Now, I've loved Catherine Center's women fiction books that I've read in the past, some of which I've read for Goodreads Choice Word videos in the past, because I think she's really good at articulating human emotion. And despite the ridiculous premise that honestly could have had me rolling my eyes, she was able to humanize both Jack and Hannah and make me really root for this relationship. There's also a fake dating element to the story, which I'm personally a big fan of. But you know, maybe the best part of it, honestly, is that Hannah didn't feel pathetic to me. She's definitely aware that Jack is hot and famous, but she's not like obsessed with him and in love with him from the jump. I will say that the ending of this book was tonally a little bit off for me, and I feel like that final conflict did have me cringing just a touch, but I just enjoyed this book so much. I had such a fun reading experience with it that I couldn't help but give it 5 stars. Maybe I do have a heart. This is obviously going in front of Funny You Should Ask. Things I'll never get over. The heroine of this book internally wondering if the man with the long weapon of mass destruction is opening a packet of Pop-Tarts or a condom in the throes of passion. Things we never got over is about runaway bride Naomi, who is escaping her impending marriage and helping out her estranged twin in a small town in Virginia. Her, no exaggeration, evil twin is leaving town and leaving behind the niece that Naomi did not know existed. And now Naomi is left to kind of pick up the pieces, kind of support her niece, and also kind of figure out what she wants out of life. She's kind of directionless, not only, you know, because she's abandoning this man that she thought she was going to marry, but also because she just doesn't really know what she wants out of life, which is further complicated, obviously, by her run-in with the town hottie and town grump, Knox. And I hated nearly every minute of it. Knox and Naomi are pretty unbearable to read about if one assumes that they are in their kind of like mid to late 20s, but when I figured out that she is like 36 and he is in his 40s, I was left scratching my head. I'm all for older couples and romance, but I'm gonna need some life experience to keep them from being idiots that I can't possibly root for. I'm not asking that everybody in a romance novel have their life figured out regardless of their age, but by the end of this book, Naomi literally has no clue what she wants to do with the rest of her life, and I'm like, not to be an asshole, but you're already kind of halfway through your life, and you have no idea what you want to do, except for, I guess, take care of your niece and bone down with this guy who you should probably not be with because he's kind of a dick. Get it together, girl. And Knox, wow, he has daddy issues that are unexplained for the vast majority of this book, and you're left wondering, why is he treating the people around him like this? And then we get this like kind of half-baked explanation on how his daddy abandoned him at a young age, and we should just feel so sorry for him, and I just didn't. And just generally speaking, I feel like this book felt like a caricature of a small town. The side characters did not feel very well fleshed out. Even Knox and Naomi feel like kind of stand-ins for kind of small town people in any small town romance that I've read, and they never really gained personality enough or gained enough emotion and heart for me, again, to really root for them. If you're looking for an emotional story or a slow burn story or a grumpy sunshine story, I feel like you can do better and find better elsewhere. I gave this book a generous 2-star rating, and though I went the hell off on this one, I think I'm actually going to put it above Funny You Should Ask, because while it was bad, I was at least mildly entertained by the sex scenes. You know, I like Emily Henry because she's not afraid to switch things up. You never know if you're going to get a deeply emotional romance or a chick lit novel with a big love declaration from a man who's been in love with you his entire life. Makes you forget that you just read a book with vague allusions to sex. Sadly, Book Lovers is the latter. It's about Nora, who is a self-proclaimed stone-cold career bitch who had to look after her sister at a very young age when her mother passed away. Which is kind of sweet until you realize that this kind of overprotectiveness is carried on into not only Nora's adult life, but her sister's adult life. And it's important to note that her sister is a grown woman, married with 2 children. She has her shit together while Nora is attempting to meddle in her life and constantly push money her way. Then we've got Charlie, our love interest, who is a rival in the publishing industry that Nora is a part of. She's an agent and he is an editor, and they kind of come back into contact whenever Nora needs someone to edit her client's newest release. And what a coinky dink, because Nora is on a girls' trip in the small town that Charlie grew up in. Now they can edit this book together. Here's the deal, this book was not bad, it was just not a satisfying romance. I think that far too much time in this book was spent on the relationship between Nora and her sister, and not enough time, honestly, was spent with Nora growing in the fact that she should maybe back off a little bit and let her sister be like a full-fledged adult person. I don't know. I also feel like Charlie felt like a little bit too much of a stand-in for Gus from the first book. It's one of those books that's perfectly serviceable as a beach read, no pun intended, but it's not one that personally made me swoon. And this might sound kind of blasphemous coming from me because I'm definitely someone who likes a guy who's been pining for the heroine for a long time, but I don't really like how Emily Henry does the same thing every single time. It never comes off very genuine or very earned when her heroes, like, in love with the heroines the entire book. It kind of made sense in People We Meet on Vacation because they were friends for a while and they did have this backstory, but in the first and third books that she's written, I'm like, why are the guys behaving like this? Like, I get it, wish fulfillment, but also it makes it very unrealistic to read about. Anyway, I initially gave this book 2 stars, but upon some further reflection and also having, like, you know, written the notes up for this video in advance, I know that this book is kind of leagues better than a lot of the things that I'm going to be reading later on, so I'm gonna bump it to 3 stars, and I think I'm gonna put it right after The Bodyguard because, in all fairness, it is better than the other 2-star reads we've talked about thus far. I am 50% into Dating Dr. Dill. This one centers on our main character. She's an attorney who has just kind of recently taken a job that she really likes. She used to be in big law, now she is working for a smaller company or a nonprofit that she really, you know, likes and respects. She seems to be the only person that's like really proud of her. She is just turning 30. Everyone else in her life is like, you need to be married or like have someone. Things get a little worse for her at the very beginning of the story because she is unceremoniously told, hey, this house that your mother kind of built from the ground up, we're going to be selling her home. She is deceased and her dad is like, yeah, I want to retire. I want to sell this house. And he doesn't give her a lot of advanced warning. She is scrambling at this point to put together enough to pay her father for like the down payment on this home so that she can continue to live there. And then we have the kind of romantic thread of the story, I guess. So we have our heroine, she sees a guy at a bar, she makes out with him, and then he basically leaves her before they can sort of consummate their relationship. He gets a phone call and then he's like, yeah, gotta go, deuces. And then she ends up kind of like reuniting or seeing him again on a television show because he is like a Dr. Oz type television doctor on a small television station, and he is doing this to raise money for a center, like a non-profit center for South Asian people, I think. He's really passionate about it because someone close to him died of a condition because they weren't being taken care of, and he's like, you know what, if I can help my community, I want to. And I think that's pretty admirable, but because of the trauma in his life, because someone passed away, he definitely doesn't believe in love, and he kind of like starts spouting that bullshit on his television program. Karima's in the audience, she stands up and is like, you're a piece of shit, you lied to me, you ghosted me. Let me just say, all of the stuff that I have just mentioned to you up until this point, it all felt a little bit strange to me. Narratively, tonally, I'm not entirely sure. I just feel like Karima as a character is a little bit immature. I do think some of her reactions are a little bit over the top. Granted, sometimes they're justified, you know, like being told her house is going to be sold, the house she's lived in her whole life, but I do feel like she overreacts in certain circumstances, and like a guy leaving you before you've slept together, like he didn't sleep with you and then just leave, you know what I mean? He didn't like ghost you, he just is busy. He's a doctor, he's on call. I think what I'm really struggling with emotionally with this story is that I can't tell if my dislike and slight disdain for the characters and the way that they behave is something that is fair or not, right? I think when you read a book about a different culture, I think it's important to kind of view that from the lens of that culture. I don't want to go into this book as a white person saying like, oh, this is so over the top and immature when like there are different cultural norms in different countries. Does that make sense? Like Bollywood movies and K-dramas have different standards of what is realistic, what is real, based on the culture that that media is representative of, if that makes sense. So I can't tell if like some of the kind of like over the top nature and some of the meddling of the aunties and stuff, like if that is representative of the culture or if it is just irritating regardless of the culture. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm trying to not view this just through my lens of like, wow, initially this bitch is really irritating. I am not hating it. I have kind of enjoyed the steamier moments in this book. I feel like they are very well written. We're actually just like kind of heading into a makeout scene between Dr. Dill and Karina. It's pretty spicy. Like I'm not mad at it at all, but I just feel like this is another traditionally published romance at the moment that I'm just kind of feeling meh about. Another thing, now that I'm thinking about it, that I don't love is the fact that this is supposed to be a fake dating situation, but our hero is spending so much time trying to convince the heroine that they should fake date that we're like 50% in, and she, I think, has just agreed or is going to agree soon to fake dating this guy, and I'm like, okay, well, why are you fighting it so hard? You both get something out of this, right? Like he is going to get the respect he needs after this thing happened on a television show so that he can make the community center happen, and she needs to get money from being engaged so she can buy the house. So I don't know, it just seems like, okay, girl, just like go with your options. option. I don't know. She thinks she can do much better. Maybe she's right. I don't know. So I finished dating Dr. Dill a couple of weeks ago, and I conveniently forgot to film a final clip for it. And in hindsight, I think that was a mistake because I don't remember very much about this book. I do remember, however, that the book is really spent with Karina and Dr. Dill deciding if they want to be in a relationship together. And by that, I mean Karina is stringing Dr. Dill along and saying like, I don't really want to be in a relationship with you. It would just be fake. We'd just be lying to people. We're not compatible. I don't love you. And then at the end of the book, they decide to get engaged. So they kind of just like skip the whole dating thing altogether and decide to be together. It was fine. I think I was getting a little bit Stockholm syndrome-y because this book was kind of long and I was so not even invested. I was listening for so long that I feel like I ended up caring more about this book than I would have otherwise. I don't know. I feel like the ending was satisfying enough, right? Like this to me is like textbook 3-star read. I appreciated the cultural elements of the story. I do think that the characters became a little bit less annoying as the story went on. Is this something that I am going to remember for years and years? Recommend to everybody I know? Probably not, but it was fine. So when we look at it among the current rankings, obviously it's going to go somewhere among the Bodyguard, Book Lovers, and Things We Never Got Over. Since this is a 3-star read, obviously it's going to go before Things We Never Got Over. Honestly, I think it's kind of forgettable in comparison to Book Lovers, which in my opinion is also a forgettable read, but this one to me is just even more forgettable, and the characters kind of annoyed me. So we're going to put that one smack dab in the middle. Hopefully this is the last time that I'm going to be reminded about this book because I am sick and tired of talking about Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover. Our heroine is Kenna and her crime is something that I don't care to spoil for you, but she went to jail for 4 years, had a baby while in prison, and since she obviously couldn't take care of her child while in prison, the baby ends up going to the paternal grandparents who don't really want Kenna to have anything to do with her daughter once she is released from prison. Our hero is Blando McManus, who has been helping the grandparents of Kenna's child, and he is unsure if he wants to choke out violently or sexually our main girl Kenna. I've pointed it out every time that I've talked about this book, but I feel like this book was a missed opportunity. The majority of this book is Kenna just sobbing and not doing anything rational to get her child back or to talk to the grandparents who have custody of her child. She tries to sneak into the grandparents' neighborhood, ring their doorbell, and like kind of sneak attack so she can like see her kid, hopefully get a glimpse of her child. And it's like, that's not really the most adult way to behave here. I feel like there are better ways, better avenues to go about this. And I just feel like the story as a whole would have been more interesting had we got to see Kenna and the way that she was coping post-prison. At the beginning of the book, we get some hints of that. She gets her new apartment, she gets a job. We get to see how challenging it is for her to find a job as someone who has recently been released from prison, but I don't feel like there was enough time spent on those interesting aspects of her life, and it was more just like kind of a sob fest. Trying to like tug on your heartstrings just wasn't for me. And don't get me started on the underbaked romance here. A couple of people have been mad in the past when I've talked about this book because I simply do not get it, and I don't understand that this book is not supposed to be a romance, and there just happens to be a romance in the book. But here's the thing. There is a romance included in this book, and I look at all romance pretty much the same. If a romance is present in a story, I want to see relationship development. I'm not asking that it be the most groundbreaking, mind-blowing relationship development ever if there are other elements in the story that are more important, but this was kind of peddled to me as a romance, and it is in the romance category for this Goodreads Choice Awards, so I'm going to view it with that lens. So similar to Book Lovers, this was not a horrible book, it was just so bland and forgettable, which is weird to say about a book with such a unique premise, but I'm gonna give this 2 stars, and I'm going to put it right behind Dating Dr. Dill. Now on to some good fucking food that had no right to make me giggle and blush the way it did because it's essentially just a rewrite of the love hypothesis. Love on the Brain has me in a goddamn chokehold, and I will fully admit that it's only because of the tropes that I think that it knocked out of the park. It's about B, certified science bitch, who goes to work for NASA, no thanks to Levi, who is her longtime academic rival, who believes that she is not only ugly as fuck, but that she is not qualified in any way to work on these like super brain helmet things for NASA. Wink wink, nudge nudge, obviously it's the complete opposite. He totally wants to bone down with her. He has this entire time. He definitely thinks she's qualified to work for NASA. In fact, he's been working behind the scenes to make sure that she has all the things that she needs to get her big brain stuff done. Our man loves a girl in galaxy leggings who moonlights as a Marie Curie Twitter stan account, because he also has an academic advice Twitter just like she does. And yes, they are indeed BFFs online, even if they don't realize it in real life. Hidden identities that aren't malicious and just help our characters get to know each other without fear and anxieties, and a guy that goes to therapy for his trauma. This book is a moist maker. I'll be the first to admit that the ending of this book is a little bit stupid, and I am aware that this book is not the pinnacle of romance writing, but I am not too proud to say that I ate the shit up, and I did give it a resounding, a swift 5 stars. To the tippy top of the list she goes. Feels kind of funny to be putting 2 sort of silly books in the first 2 places, but I think this just goes to show that a book doesn't have to be overly serious and tug at your heartstrings to be solid, if it makes your panties flood like a cranberry bog at harvest time. With curse in the title, I should have known that this witchy romance was not going to break the witchy romance curse, which is to say that every time I've attempted to read a romance with witches at the center, it has just never gone to plan. I've never, to this day, enjoyed a witchy romance. I don't know what it is, but there seems to be something fundamentally incompatible about Bone and Down and potions. This book is about Gwen, who owns a witchy trinket shop in a town that is known for being particularly witchy. But oh no, a sexy man in vest comes to town and tries to open a rival shop right across the road. Wouldn't it be funny if magical dust made them kiss? Wouldn't it be funny if that magic dust was just body glitter and they really did want to kiss each other the entire time and that was just an excuse? It would also be super cool if they only had 2 real conversations before hopping in bed together and then proclaiming their love for each other. I'm about to fall asleep just thinking about it. This book was atmospheric and short, I will give it that, but the romantic elements were just completely missing here. There was absolutely no spark, in my opinion, between Gwen and Wells, and I'm surprised that with all of the popular romances that came out this year, this book was able to kind of sneak its way onto the list. This one's getting 2 stars, and I think I'm going to put it between Reminders of Him and Things We Never Got Over. Again, because it was short, and also because at least Reminders of Him attempted to be unique and say something important, whereas Things We Never Got Over, I mean, the only redeemable thing, not even redeemable thing, the only funny thing about that book was the sex scenes. Like, nothing else was worth reading. At least this one was like, yeah, witchy, Third time's a charm, is it not? I have tried to film this clip quite a few times, and I just feel like the words are not coming the way that I want them to, but I'm 50% into Thank You for Listening by Julia Whalen, or should I just call it Book Lovers Like, because that's essentially what I'm getting here, but not in a way that I'm hating. So this book's about our main character, Sawani, and she is dealing with a lot. So we find out pretty early on that she has a facial injury, and this is impacting not only her professional life, but also her personal life. Personally, she is feeling a little bit insecure and hasn't really sought out any sort of like romance since her injury, and then professionally, she really wanted to be an actor. She was an aspiring actor. She was kind of getting somewhere in her career when she got in this horrible accident, and now she doesn't feel like she can be in the spotlight. So she has taken a job as an audiobook narrator instead. She's finding fulfillment in her work, but I think there are definitely still lingering hurts here because she has a hard time kind of talking about the accident. Additionally, she is looking out for her grandma who is losing her memory. She is in an assisted care facility, but she's going to have to soon be moved to the memory care side of things, which is much more expensive, and Sawani's not really sure how she is going to pay for this. And the way she's going to get that money is by narrating romance again. She has kind of sworn off narrating romance because it's just not for her, but she decides that she's going to narrate this audiobook kind of serial series with a guy because this one author left in her will that she wanted Sawani to kind of like narrate the serial thing with a guy. Sawani's getting close with the guy. They are texting. She is kind of dealing with the fact that like she might have growing feelings for this person that she doesn't really know, but also she is trying to kind of like hold parts of herself back because, she's scared of rejection, especially since she does have this injury. I like this book. It is a lot to handle. It definitely is feeling a little bit more on the women's fiction side of things, given all of the kind of like real life things that are happening. But that being said, I do think this one is adeptly handling the balance of romance with the real world issues, which I don't think book lovers did a very good job at. I'm really enjoying text conversations between Brock, that male audiobook narrator, and Sawani. The dialogue, it's not anything particularly witty or snappy. Definitely not, I would say, like same level as Emily Henry in terms of dialogue writing, but something about the dialogue is making me just want to hug Sawani because she is getting so excited in these conversations. It seems like she hasn't had anyone to like truly confide in a while. She has a best friend who's also an actor who she's like really happy for, but her friend is gone a lot of the time, like trying to seek some opportunities and, make it big. And Sawani's supportive of this, but she's like, she feels a little bit alone. And to see her kind of confide in Brock and start to maybe fall for him is really nice, even though she doesn't feel like she can 100% open up yet, assuming over the course of the book she will. Another kind of interesting thing about this book is that at the very beginning, Sawani is going to an audiobook narration conference. She meets this guy and has like one kind of wild night of passion. And I think what we're going to find is that that is Brock. Could be wrong here, but I just have a feeling like why would that have happened if like they're not related in some way? I'll be interested to see if it's the same guy and if that guy was like lying, because at the beginning of the book, that guy has an Irish accent and we don't know if Brock is American or not. I think he mostly does American accents for audiobooks, but like, is that the guy? I don't know. Sawani was also doing a fake accent whenever she met him. I think she was doing like a Texan accent. So I'm interested to see. I really do think this is going to be like a sort of mistaken identity, hidden identity thing, but obviously not in any sort of like malicious way, because I just think both of them individually don't know who the other is. I could be grasping at straws here, but this ain't my first rodeo. Y'all know that. If there's one thing I know, it's romance. I'm hoping that Sawani's grandmother gets the care that she needs. I'm hoping that Sawani is able to enter back into the spotlight like she wants to. She just did an audition for a movie that her friend is starring in. I also hope obviously that she gets with Brock and that there's like some steamy banging. This book's good. It feels unique and original in a sense, and I don't think I've ever read a book about an audiobook narrator before. And our author, if you didn't know, Miss Julia Whalen, is the audiobook narrator. She does pretty much everybody's audiobooks, including Miss Emily Henry, which I think is probably why I was thinking of Emily Henry when I started reading this one. But So far, I'm not hating this. Well, I certainly didn't expect to find a 5-star read in the books that I had to vlog for this video, but here we are. I thoroughly enjoyed. Thanks for listening, and I think the comparisons to Emily Henry are so accurate. This book was what I wanted book lovers to be. It was kind of an ode to the romance genre. Not that like Book Lovers was attempting to do that, but I feel like you get to learn more about sort of like the audiobook process, which is nice. I just fell so hard for these characters. I thought Nick was such a delight, and we learn more about his identity and sort of his insecurities as the story goes on. We also get to see our heroine just really go through it at times, and I'm not gonna lie, there were two times in this book that I teared up. So for me, if a book is going to elicit that sort of emotion, it's almost always going to be a 5-star read. That's not like the benchmark I use. I'm not like, oh, I cried, this is great. But truly, if a book does elicit that kind of emotion and it's not trying too hard to elicit that emotion, oh, that's a good thing. Really realistic the way both of our characters were dealing again with those insecurities and kind of trying to come together despite the sort of individual struggles that they had. It was perfection. I really enjoyed this one. I think if you enjoy Emily Henry, there is no reason that you wouldn't enjoy this book. I'm not saying you'll like it as much as Book Lovers or the other books that she's written because, you know, Emily Henry, she's her own author for sure. But I felt like the characters in this book felt, in my opinion, more unique and more nuanced and more real than the characters in Book Lovers. I just didn't really love Charlie in that book, and I felt like Nora was a little bit of a nag, and I didn't feel that way in this book, and I would highly recommend, okay? But now I'm left with the question of where to rank this among the other 5-star reads that we already have on the board with Love on the Brain and The Bodyguard. It's sort of a toughie for me because I feel like this one could be above Love on the Brain if I was gonna go for something that really felt truly heartfelt and emotional. But the thing is, Love on the Brain had me like giggling and blushing, and this book didn't go quite that hard, mostly because there's not an explicit on-page sex scene, which has to dock it a little bit, right? Like it's not quite up there with Love on the Brain for me. But The Bodyguard I think also doesn't really have on-page sex scenes, so I feel pretty confident putting it smack dab in the middle between Love on the Brain and The Bodyguard. Who would have thunk? I found a 5-star read. Back-to-back 5-star reads, will wonders never cease? Terms and Conditions is the second book in the Dreamland Billionaire series, and this one is about Declan and Iris. Declan is looking to claim part of the family inheritance, and his task is to marry before he takes over the reins of this like Disney Lake company. But unfortunately, Declan is a kind of hard man to love, and he has scared away many an eligible lady, and one day he's actually left at his engagement party without a fiance to be engaged to. So Iris comes to the rescue. She is his personal assistant, and she is going to be his fake fiance just for this particular party until it kind of evolves into something more. This book was really fun and charming in ways that the first book in the series was not. I feel like the setting of this book was really fun. Obviously, it's like Disney adjacent, so it's going to be kind of fun, but it also didn't feel too juvenile. I feel like the heroine in the first book was a little too juvenile for me. I feel like the emotions in this book too were a lot stronger than in that first book. I liked both characters here. They had what I consider to be realistic baggage, and our hero grovels super hard when he messes up at the end of the book. I will say this one is not a true standout in terms of having like the most original or unique plot out there, or the most original and inventive like relationship dynamic. It's like a fake dating situation or a marriage of convenience situation. Again, it's like not the most original, but sometimes familiar tropes done well are all that you need to have a successful romance. You don't have to think totally outside of the box if you're going to nail the tropes that you do choose to use. So I gave this book 5 stars, and while I adored Bodyguard by Catherine Center, I think this one edges it out just a little bit because of the depth of emotion here. All aboard the Sociopath Express, let's talk about The Wedding Crasher and its absolutely bizarre hero. This book is about Solange and Dean. Dean is getting married at the beginning of this book because he wants to get a promotion at work, and what better way to do that than being married and being a family man. He picks a woman who he has an agreement with and is all set to walk down the aisle until Solange overhears his bride professing her love to another man. When Dean is confronted with this information, he's not too upset because he doesn't really care for the woman that he's marrying, and he doesn't care if she has indiscretions, but it's also going to kind of look bad in front of his family, who kind of like has overheard this conversation if he goes through with this marriage. So he ends up, of course, dumping the woman that he is, you know, set to marry. She's not too upset about this either. She's gonna like get with the guy that she proclaimed her love for. But Dean's in a bit of a pickle because, again, career is important, and marrying someone for your career apparently makes a whole lot of sense. So since Solange is the one that broke up this impending marriage, he decides that she is going to be his next victim. And by that I mean she is going to be his fake fiance to some work events in the future so that he looks like, I don't know, a really cool guy who really cares about people. With romance, much like in real life, I think first impressions are everything. And while this book proceeded actually in a fairly normal fashion after this sort of like weird introduction, I still couldn't get over the way that Dean went about trying to find someone to marry. It felt really, really weird to me, and I wasn't convinced as the story went on that he really felt strongly for Solange. A lot of it was just like, okay, I'm going about doing this so I can get a promotion. Overall, this book was just pretty blah and forgettable outside of the setup, so I ended up giving this one 2 stars. And I put it between The Kiss Curse and Things We Never Got Over. You know, I've got to hand it to Tessa Bailey. She was incredibly prolific this year, and I'm sure she made fat stacks of cash as a result, so mad respect there. But did I like any of the 3 books that she published this year? Not really. At least Hook, Line, and Sinker is my favorite of the 3 that she did publish. This book is about Fox and Hannah, who are characters in It Happened One Summer. I would say Tessa Bailey's like most famous work to date. They have sort of a friends to lovers forced proximity situation going on, but they're kept apart by Hannah's crush on a coworker and Fox's reputation as a man whore. And among the books I've read this year, I feel like this one is really deserving of a like forgettable middle spot. It had some of Tessa Bailey's signature charm, and the plot was tight enough, but it didn't feel memorable in a sea of other romances. I think that was due in large part, unfortunately, to Fox's character. I'm honestly fine with the reformed womanizer trope. Fox's woe is me bit when his friends were like teasing him for sleeping with so many women when he really just wanted to like find someone to fall in love with got a little bit tired. I was like, just speak up for yourself. Just tell these people that you want to find a woman to love. Like, they are in successful relationships. They understand what that's like. So like, why can't you just be honest with the people who you're supposed to be friends with? I also feel like in terms of little moments, this book was a little bit lacking. By that I mean that Tessa Bailey typically does a really fantastic job at making you feel like the hero and the heroine are super compatible, not just on a shared interest level, but because the hero and the heroine kind of fundamentally understand things about each other. There will be these little poignant moments where you're like, oh my god, he gets her. Like in It Happened One Summer, where a hero ends up taking our heroine shopping even though he has no interest in doing that. He understands the heroine on an emotional level and wants to do things just to please her. And I don't feel like there were enough moments of that here. Overall, this was a perfectly average 3-star read, and I think I'm going to put this one between The Bodyguard and Book Lovers. So I'm 50% into How to Make a Fool of All of the Guys You've Been With Because You're Loving the Crew. You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by a quick game essay. What to even say about this book? Okay, I'm not hating it. I don't think it's a bad book, but I don't think it's as developed as I wanted it to be. So he's just grooming himself with reckless abandon back there. Let's ignore him. So this book is about our main character, who I have conveniently forgotten the name of, Faye, and she is dealing with the aftermath of the loss of her husband. I think her husband passed away 5 years ago, so I mean, it's not exactly fresh. But she is finally ready to sow her wild oats, and she does in spectacular fashion in a bathroom with a guy she's never met. Does she use a condom? No, because that would be like way too cool. And she starts like kind of dating this guy, mostly just hooking up with him for a little while until she meets his best friend, gets with the best friend instead. I don't think that the guy that she's banging at the beginning of the book's really that mad about it. Don't worry, the love doesn't stop there. She not only bangs the guy's best friend, she starts crushing on his daddy. What to even say? I feel like that's all that really needs to be said about this book. It's not bad. I do think it is attempting to handle harder hitting topics like grief. Yeah, that's pretty much the only harder hitting topic it's really trying to address. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I don't know that I think it's that spectacular. I have read a few books at this point on grief, and I feel like this one isn't going as deep as I'd like. I was reading some Goodreads reviews. I need to stop doing that. But who am I except for a Goodreads reviewer, right? Read a review that said something to the effect, I don't think that grief was a good enough reason to have these two people get together. And you know what? I'm sort of feeling like this. I'm not disliking the dad. I feel like I need to come up with a better name for him. Maybe I could just remember his character name. That could be a thing. I feel like he's a nice enough guy. I feel like he is supporting our main character, Faye, through her grief. He's also dealing with grief of his own, so like that's kind of what they're bonding and connecting over. But like, I am not really seeing this like big attraction there and or this like incredible love story that is taking place. I think I went into this expecting something deeply emotional and like heart-wrenching, and I just am not feeling that. But I'm also only 50% in, so you know what? I'm gonna come back to you with like more full-fledged thoughts when I'm finished, okay? I don't want to judge this book too harshly now. What a bizarre book. I literally just got finished with this book. I have no idea where I'm going to rate it, where I'm going to put it amongst the rankings of these books, but I am puzzled. For some reason, I thought this was going to be a deeply emotional, nuanced story that felt more chick lit than romance, but what I'm left with is a very, very weak third-person romance with absolutely no development. And I'm kind of shocked that so many people enjoy this book and that this is something that has been touted as like one of the best of the year. Is it the worst thing I've read? Absolutely not. I have read so many more romances that do a great job with age gap that I'm just so confused. Like, what is this book? Like I said in the last clip, our main character, Faye, ends up getting with her her boyfriend or like friend who she kind of like has a thing with but like isn't sleeping with at the moment. She gets with his father. I just feel like everything about this book was very shallow and surface level. This book is supposed to talk about grief, but I feel like we are barely scratching the surface of what that actually means. It's like we're told that our heroine loved her husband before he passed away. We are told that she thinks about him often, but we don't really get to delve into what those emotions mean besides the fact that she won't sleep with anyone as a result of it. I do, again, have to agree with the Goodreads reviews that I saw, specifically Monty's, specifically when he said that he didn't think that grief was a good vehicle for this romance because it felt so surface level. Like, that is really what this book is. It is so surface level. There's nothing there. It's like, okay, our main character decides that because she is grieving and because her boyfriend's father, who's also hot, is also kind of grieving the loss of his wife, that they are a perfect pairing and that she wants to jump in bed with him. And she doesn't do it immediately or anything. But it's not like there are these really deep, rich conversations had between these two where I'm like, wow, damn, y'all are really well suited for each other. She really just thinks with her kitty cat, and I just don't know that that is really compelling to me. Doesn't seem to care very much about people's emotions or feelings. And yeah, the boyfriend, Nasir or whatever, he like comes into the story and is like, hey, why are you fucking my dad? And he gets really mad about it, and he gets like very aggressive, even though that's not his character at the beginning of the book. He just does a 180 in character. I think maybe so we're not supposed to feel sympathetic towards him. I'm not really sure. But he's, you know, all outraged at the fact that, you know, his dad is sleeping with his girlfriend, and then Nasir, the boyfriend's sister, is also mad and also bitches at the dad, but nothing really comes of it and it doesn't really matter. And ultimately this book, I think this is the most disappointing book that I've had to read for this video thus far. Not that I expected much for any of these books, but for some reason I really wanted to read this one because I'd heard such good things. And part of me, when I finished this book, I was like, okay, let me try to think clearly through this. Am I viewing this through a weird lens because I have been reading a lot of books about grief recently and like this one is just far inferior? Am I viewing this from in personal feelings? Like, am I too depressed to be in the headspace to enjoy this book? But no, I don't know if you have noticed, but these clips are filmed pretty back to back for the vlog portions of this video. I actually also just finished Thanks for Listening, and that one brought me to tears. So I know that I am very much in an emotional headspace, and yet this one just couldn't possibly elicit emotion. You win some, you lose some. I don't think that I have to love every book that I read for this video, but I want you to know that I really fully intended to enjoy this book. I wanted to. I think I was willing to put aside any mishap. No, this book wasn't sexy. I didn't find it very fun. I didn't feel like it was very well developed. What a bummer. I know that Akwaeke Emeze has written other books, and I'm interested in reading some of their other stuff. This one was just not, it wasn't it for me. I just don't feel like this was very romantical. Now I'm in a tough situation because I don't know where to rank this book. For me, I think this is going to be a 2-star read. I think I liked it more than The Wedding Crasher. But I don't think I liked it as much as The Kiss Curse, which is saying something because I didn't enjoy The Kiss Curse. I think I'm going to put it between The Kiss Curse and The Wedding Crasher, you know, fairly confident about that. And to be honest, I feel like none of the rankings of the latter books in this list really matter because I don't anticipate these being the books that make it to the final voting round, or at least I don't feel like they should. So that's where we're putting it. Moving on. Now let's talk about a story of redemptive love, both in the themes of the book and also in my feelings about this author's work. And had it not been for a video earlier in this year where I was technically forced to read this book, I don't think I would have picked this one up on my own. I have struck out 3 times in the past with her works, and I just didn't really expect this 4th one to do anything particularly different. But fate intervened in June and gave me an absolute fucking gem. Part of Your World is about Alexis and Daniel, who have kind of a meet-cute situation happen in Daniel's small town. Alexis, at the start of the story, is coming out of an emotionally abusive relationship that she's been in for kind of a while, and she's also starting to kind of unravel the situations that led her to that relationship. Her mom is actually in an emotionally abusive relationship with her father, and her father was emotionally abusive to her as well. So a lot of this book is spent with Alexis kind of working through this intergenerational trauma and trying to kind of break that cycle of abuse. And Daniel is working through his own baggage while also trying to kind of keep his family's business afloat. And honestly, this book was everything that I did not know that I needed. This book was incredibly emotional and heartfelt. It had an absolutely adorable golden retriever boyfriend who was definitely more than meets the eye. It's one of those books that, in my opinion, is just kind of hard to fully summarize, and I think it's a book that you would be remiss not to pick up. This is one of my favorite books of the year, and I give this book, again, a resounding 5 stars. When I look at it against my other 5-star reads, I think that it's right on par with Love on the Brain, but I think if I'm being objective in terms of writing craft and impact that I think this book could have on me long term, or other people that pick it up, I think this book is going to win out, and it will take that top spot. Switching gears a little bit, let's talk about one of the most overhyped books this year that really spit in the face of originality, Every Summer After. Now, I guess I begrudgingly respect the hustle and grind of someone trying to age up beloved YA characters or a beloved YA book. I'm looking at you, the summer I turned pretty, but I guess I was just hoping for something a little bit more unique. This book is about our heroine named Persephone, because of course it is, who meets these 2 hot, sexy brothers whenever her parents buy a lake house next door to these boys. She grows closest with the younger brother Sam until one summer, everything everything changes. Flash forward, and our heroine is attending the funeral of the boy's mother, who she was really close to growing up, and in the process, she reunites with Sam, healing old wounds, which we find out are self-inflicted because our heroine is a big dum-dum. Now, I love a good friends to lovers, spending only the summers together story as much as the next bitch. But this one, in my opinion, was equal parts annoying and predictable. I didn't feel like the flashback scenes were compelling enough relationship development to justify rekindled emotions in present day. And there is literally no relationship development in present day to make up for that lack of relationship development in the past. Which is not to mention the big reason that these two had a falling out in the first place, which I'm not going to spoil, but if you know, you know. And if you're a guesser, I'm sure you can guess. If you want a summer romance that feels nearly identical but does these tropes and more much better, might I recommend Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. This is a 2-star book for me. And somehow I enjoyed this one even less than Things We Never Got Over, so I'm gonna put it in the second to last spot. Looking grubby, but I'm 50% into Fan Service by Colleen Hoover. Or should I say, It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. This is the sequel to It Ends With Us, which was a book that Colleen Hoover wrote, I think in 2018, that a lot of people have a lot of emotional attachment to. It is, I think, the only Colleen Hoover book that I've ever given 5 stars to. It's one that I personally thought was really good at the time that I read it. I don't know how I'd feel about it if I revisited it, and frankly, I wasn't going to do that ahead of this video. I wanted to go into this book knowing kind of the gist of, you know, that first book. I mean, I've read it before, but having some degree of separation from it, because I want to see if this book kind of stands okay on its own, in addition to being like a decent sequel, right? And I think at this 50% mark, I can say that I don't think this book needed to exist, sadly. The general premise of the first book is that our main character, Lily, had kind of a rough upbringing. Her mom was in an emotionally abusive relationship with Lily's father. She unfortunately continues the cycle of abuse, marrying a man who does end up abusing her. She breaks the cycle by divorcing this man and insisting that she is never going to be in a relationship like this again. It's a really empowering book. I feel like it is very nuanced. I do think it is the best book that Colleen Hoover has written to date. Yeah, I mean, it was a solid book. Do I think that it needed a sequel about Lily's romantic relationship after leaving her husband? Not really. I did like Atlas in that first book. Atlas is the guy that is the main love interest, I guess you could say, in It Starts With Us, and he is like the childhood, you know, friends to lovers kind of thing, second chance romance situation that we know that Lily is going to have at the end of that book. She ends up coming back into contact with this guy that she knew when she was in high school, who kind of left and she never saw again. She sees him in like the last chapter, the epilogue of that book, and we're like, ooh, I wonder what their relationship's gonna look like. And I like that open ending. I don't think this book needed to exist. This book starts exactly where the last book left off. We get to see Lily and Atlas kind of rekindling their relationship, spending more time together, seeing Lily, I guess, deal with the aftermath of this divorce from her ex-husband. He is very much still in her life because she's having to kind of co-parent with him. And I do think that that is something that is valuable, I guess, to show on page, but I don't know if it justifies an entire book. I don't know that I want to see her, unfortunately, deal with an emotionally abusive person a second time. I don't know that I care enough about the romantic relationship between Lily and Atlas to continue putting in the emotional effort to read this book. Like, I'm gonna finish it, but I'm just kind of left thinking, like, it's not horrible, but what is the point of this book? It's not a particularly romantic story, I would say. I mean, it's not horrible or anything. It's definitely more romantic than the first book, but I don't think that Colleen Hoover really writes romance, to be honest. She does tend to write books with romantic threads, but she doesn't write a lot of like standalone, this is a romance. They all have kind of heart-wrenching emotions to them, and I'm not saying that that's bad necessarily, but I don't think that she is able to kind of marry those two things together particularly well in most of her books. I think that the romance kind of always takes a back seat to the harder hitting topics here, and we're having some like other conflicts come in this book that I'm just kind of like not caring so much about. They don't feel very unique or original, unlike the first book in the series, which did feel unique and original to an extent. This one, you know, we're bringing in some conflicts that just feel a little bit tired and like a little bit like I just don't care about them. Not the, you know, learning to grow from abuse thing. Like, that's obviously something that I think is valuable, but particularly the conflict that comes in for Atlas, I'm just like, okay, I guess like we're just bringing in conflict to kind of spice things up to where it would be harder for these two to get together or stay together. We know what's going to happen, which is going to be that they are going to end up together. I'm pretty sure that the conflict of the story is going to be the complication of the new person in Alice's life that kind of shakes things up, and also having Ryle, the ex-husband of Lily, kind of like come in and be angry that she is in contact with Atlas and dating him at all because he is angry that they're divorced in the first place. I will be shocked if there is any other bigger conflict here, though, you know, Colleen Hoover does go for shock and awe, so we'll see. I'm not mad at this book. I don't hate this book. It's been fine to read, but I am not entranced and enthralled because because we already got the romantic thread in that first book. I already knew that these two were going to end up together. So it feels very low stakes in this book. And I guess you could say all romance has a happily ever after. It would feel low stakes to an extent, but yeah, this just feels like a retread. Like I'm not getting a lot new here. So I finished It Starts With Us last night, and I will say this book turned out much better than I had expected, and I definitely enjoyed it more than when I talked to you last. Is this book simply for the fans? Is this book something that can stand on its own? It's definitely the former, not the latter. I feel like if you really enjoy Colleen Hoover's writing, you really enjoyed It Ends With Us, I think It Starts With Us is going to be fun for you because you get to see Lily and Atlas get together. It feels fan service, though I will say the conclusion of the story is really, heartwarming and sweet. I don't think this works as a standalone novel simply because I don't think there are enough stakes or tension to make it interesting, and I don't think that there's enough relationship development between Lily and Atlas in this book. Sure, we do get splices of the letters and the journal entries from Lily and Atlas, so we do see that, they did have love for each other in the past, but I don't think there was enough in terms of present day relationship development for me to be really convinced that these two belong together had I just viewed this as a, standalone novel. Now, obviously, we know the history of these two. We got to see that in the first book, so I think it's okay, if you read that one first and read this one, you will probably feel very satisfied, probably really love this book. So in essence, I think this book was exactly what Colleen Hoover set out for it to be. Was it my perfect romance? Absolutely not. Was this the most well-rounded romance ever? Also not. But is this more romantic than Reminders of Him? It absolutely is. And did I feel like this was satisfying enough to give 3 stars? Yes, I did. I am going to put this one between The Bodyguard and Hook, Line, and Sinker. Obviously liked Hook, Line, and Sinker quite a bit more than the books that come after it. And so I was kind of debating, where do I put It Starts With Us? But honestly, I do think that this one had enough to say and had enough emotional spark, more so than Hook, Line, and Sinker, that I feel pretty good putting it right in front of it. Seeing it on this list and seeing it kind of high up in the rankings and knowing that it's probably going to make the top 10 is a little bit wild to me, but you know what? I'm not going to think too hard about it. Now, I wish I could say that the only sapphic book on this list was a total hit for me, but I would unfortunately be lying. Delilah Green Doesn't Care is about our main character Delilah, who is back in town to photograph her evil stepsissy's wedding. She's there to, I guess, heal from the trauma of her upbringing, but mostly she's there to sabotage her stepsister's impending nuptials. At her big age of 30, while in town, she ends up meeting her stepsister's best friend with a super juicy booty, who she decides to bed and eventually falls for. And then she kind of makes up with her stepsister and they all live happily ever after. I just personally feel like the elements of this story that were not romance kind of sucked. Delilah was painfully immature, and the overall tone of the story just felt a little bit off to me. The family issues in this book really made it feel melancholic. And then we'd switch over immediately to flirty banter with Claire, and it kind of had my head spinning. I will say I do appreciate a sapphic book with smutty ass sex scenes that are more than just gentle caresses, but I think I needed a pure rom-com and less of that signature Ashley Herring Blake emotional YA thing going on. This one I'm putting between It Starts With Us and Hook, Line, and Sinker. Now we're nearing the end of this list and the end of my desire to adequately sum up my feelings and thoughts on these books. Electric Idol is another book by Katie Robert that I think should have just been smut. It's in her Modern Day Olympus series and it follows Psyche and Eros. She's a Kardashian wannabe and he's a guy that needs to carry out a hit on her because his mommy does not like this girl at all. But he is blinded by her bodacious bod and thinks he might be experiencing feelings for the first time. So he decides that he's going to enter into a fake relationship with our girl, and then of course real feelings come up and he's like, oh my god, maybe I'm not actually a sociopath. I love this woman. And in doing so, he hopes that his mommy won't want to kill Psyche anymore. But he's wrong. Good news though is that the conflict is wrapped up incredibly quickly and he does end up living happily ever after with this bitch. And if you want a knockoff Edward Cullen Greek god and an underdeveloped Mary Sue Bella Swan, you might be happy with this. But it was just nothing special to me personally, and I am going to promptly forget about it after I film this video. This was a 2-star read for me, and I think I am going to put this one between The Wedding Crasher and Things We Never Got Over. It was not egregiously bad. I did not snort whenever I was reading the sex scenes like I did with Things We Never Got Over. How many times am I going to talk about the sex scenes in this book at this point? Anyway, it's going to go between The Wedding Crasher and Things We Never Got Over. You're a mini poop head. No, you are. Is that enough of a summary of this book? Twisted Hate is the only one of Anne Huang's books, for the record, that I have actively disliked. And dislike it, I did. This book is about Josh and Jules. Josh is a hotshot doctor, and Josh is Jules's best friend's brother. They hate each other for seemingly no reason, but after years of constantly insulting each other and teasing each other, the fiery passion ignites between the two of them. I had 2 issues here. Number 1, the dialogue, in my opinion, was a little bit immature. Don't get me wrong, I'm totally cool with petty insults. I just was hoping that they would feel a little bit more elevated since both of our characters are in professional fields. Our hero's a doctor, our heroine's an attorney, and they're mid-20s at this point, right? This is not high school bullying or high school teasing. Y'all are full-grown adults. Think of some more creative insults than you're a mini poop head. That's kind of what I was getting here. And number 2, the main conflict here being dishonesty really really didn't work for me. Now, everyone has their hangups when it comes to romance. Some people can't abide by cheating. Some people completely gag at the miscommunication trope. I don't fuck with lying to your partner. Broken trust is something that I think is incredibly hard to repair in a romantic relationship, and the way that one of our characters lies to the other character and the way that that character reacts as a result was something that I was not comfortable with, and I was deeply uncomfortable again with kind of like the results of that lying. I will say, while I didn't enjoy this book, I would recommend that you pick up other books by Anna Huang. Again, this is like the only one that I disliked. I was actually really hoping that one of her other 2 publications this year would have made it on this list. Sadly, they didn't, but anyway, this book was 2 stars, and I think I'm going to put this one between Electric Idol and Things We Never Got Over. As much as I didn't enjoy Electric Idol, as much as I feel like it would have been better off just being like short smut, I wasn't offended by the things that were in that book, and unfortunately Twisted Hate, that like final conflict was just very off-putting to me. For the second time, I am going to be DNFing The American Roommate Experiment by Alina Armas. I wanted to enjoy this story. I wanted to give it a second chance. I went into this book a couple of months ago. I purchased the paperback because I was like, you know what? I didn't like the Spanish Love Deception, but maybe this one is going to be an improvement. This one had a traditional editor to edit the story. Like, maybe this is going to be worlds better. And unfortunately for me, but I guess fortunately for our author, the story definitely still feels like Alina Armas. And, you know, that's good or bad depending on who you ask. Not very good for me, but like, I guess maybe good for some people. This one I didn't like because of the immaturity of our characters. That was an issue that I had with the first book, and I feel like it's even more present in this book. This one is about our 2 main characters, Rosie and Lucas. Lucas is Catalina's cousin from the first book, and Rosie is Lena's best friend from the first book. They have sort of like a friends to lovers situation going on, or at least I'm assuming that's what happens. I've only ever gotten like 100-ish pages into this book, if that, and I think this book is mostly about them trying to kind of individually find out what they want to do with their lives and also kind of falling for each other. But everything from the opening of this book to the explanation of what these characters want, I did not buy it and I did not enjoy it. I didn't appreciate that Rosie's first instinct when someone is trying to get into Lena's apartment when Lena isn't there is to call the police. It felt weird, and she like stays on the phone even though the person on the other side of the door is trying to talk to her and be like, hey, I have permission to be here. I don't know. It didn't read as cute to me. I'm very happy and very confident in DNFing this book. You know, I will say I'm a little disappointed because I don't love DNFing books for these videos, but I think this might be the least amount of DNFs that I've had in a Goodreads Choice Award video before. I'm okay with it. I'm very, very okay with not reading this book. My apologies if this is your favorite book ever and you really wanted to know my thoughts and feelings, but I think I am happy enough with my economic contribution to this author. I purchased her book. I will be selling it to Half Price Books. I did my part, you know, and that's really all we could ask. So unfortunately, since this book is a DNF, I think I'm going to have to put it at the bottom of the pile. I'm gonna gray it out so that it doesn't look quite as sad and harsh in that bottom slot. You know, maybe this one would have surprised me. Maybe this one would have been better than like Every Summer After, Funny You Should Ask, or Things We Never Got Over, or really any of the books that I kind of actively disliked on this list, but I'm feeling okay putting it in that last place slot. So now that I have read all 20 of the nominees, let's go ahead and whittle that down to 10. I obviously already have a top 10 selected because of the way that I went about ranking the books as we went, but I don't fully believe that the 10 books that I loved are going to make it to that final voting round, so I'm gonna try to predict, based on popularity, what I think is going to be the most popular, kind of in order, and then we can compare it to the real finalists. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull up my finalists and my predictions. So as you can see, my finalists, the top 10 books that I enjoyed the most, are not the books that I necessarily think are going to be in that final voting round. I know that a lot of the books that I like are not the most popular and vice versa. So in that top spot, I have Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This is a book that I hotly debated putting in that top spot. I was kind of between, I would say, the top 4 or 5 books on this list. Knowing Emily Henry and knowing the way that she totally dominates these like awards and how many people have read this book, I think I'm gonna put that in the top spot. And then I feel pretty confident about like the next 5 or so of these books. I think Reminders of Him's gonna show up, Love on the Brain, It Starts With Us, Things We Never Got Over, and Every Summer After. I'd be genuinely shocked not to see these in the final voting round. The last 4 books, I'm a little bit uncertain about. I know a lot of people enjoyed Twisted Hate, and I think because this was an indie that I was surprised to see in the nominee category at all, for some reason I think it's going to make it to the final voting round. I also like to think that the one sapphic book on this list will make it to the final voting round, just like selfishly. And then Tessa Bailey and Elena Armas are really popular, and I'm pretty sure they made it to the final voting round last year, so those are kind of like my predictions. And as you can see here, I don't think that Thank You for Listening, Terms and Conditions, The Bodyguard, or Dating Dr. Dill are going to make it to the final voting round. And the ones that are highlighted in red in my predictions, those are the ones that were not in obviously my top 10, but I think like are very likely to make it onto the final voting round. So let me go ahead and pull up Goodreads and we can kind of examine these together. I am not saying that I'm incredible, but I am saying that I am damn proud of how I did. So when comparing like my top 10 to my predictions to the real top 10, I think it's pretty obvious that my predictions were spot fucking on. Those first two spots being identical, I feel really good about. Book Lovers, Reminders of Him being the top 2, I get it. And then seeing that Love on the Brain and It Starts With Us are just like flip-flopped in my predictions versus the real top 10. And then the same thing, oh my god, with Things We Never Got Over and Every Summer After, those ones are flipped. And then same with Twisted Hate and Delilah Green Doesn't Care. Oh my god, am I getting all of these right? Okay, no, there is some deviation here and some variance. The American Roommate Experiment as part of my predictions, but Terms and Conditions actually made it on the list, which is kind of cool to see. I didn't expect 2 true indies to make it to this list, but that's pretty cool. I really like that. And it's definitely, I would say, a change from last year, so that's nice to see. When it comes to my top 10 in comparison to the real top 10, there is a fair amount of overlap, but when compared to like last year where I got 7 out of the 10 right amongst my own top 10 and the real top 10, I'm a little sad that I only got 6 out of 10 this time. Obviously, Love on the Brain, Terms and Conditions, It Started With Us, Delilah Green Doesn't Care, Hook, Line, and Sinker, Book Lovers, like, I'm glad to see all of those on the real top 10, I would say, but I am kind of sad to see some of my favorites just not on the list and completely ignored, but I think that means that more people need to read those. That y'all need to read Part of Your World, Thank You for Listening, and The Bodyguard. Like, those are, in my opinion, some of the best romances of this year, and I think they're highly slept on, especially Thank You for Listening. That's a book that I feel like I've heard virtually nothing about. I think there has been some traction on Part of Your World lately. I think a lot of people have been picking that one up, but beyond The Bodyguard being like a book of the month selection, I don't feel like I hear people talking about it. So in conclusion, are the Goodreads Choice Awards just kind of a popularity contest? Clearly, I maintain that Book Lovers was not the best romance published this year, but I don't begrudge Emily Henry her success. Good for her. Get that coin, girl. Now, if she could only write something quite as grand as People We Meet on Vacation next, that's what I'm hoping, right? Like an every other book thing, I'm fine with that. But having 2 out of 3 of her books not be my favorite and one of them be like a 5-star favorite romance of all time, I don't know. It's kind of confounding to me. I hope you enjoyed some of the new additions this year with the predictions at the beginning and also with the kind of more in-depth thoughts on kind of the rankings and ratings, my predictions compared to what actually were the finalists, what actually was the winner. In the comments down below, I would absolutely love it if you would tell me your favorite romance of 2022 and if your thoughts and feelings align with any of mine on the ratings and rankings of these books. But I love y'all so much. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for making Chanmas such a fun experience so far this year. If you've missed any of Chanmas, I will leave the playlist in the description down below. But thanks so much for watching this video. I love y'all so much. And until next time.